This program is presented by the Fromm Institute for Lifelong Learning at the University of San Francisco. The Fromm Institute, keeping up with the times, no matter when.
Okay, so I was thinking about this in terms of how we got to where we are now in our Opera for Laughs. We've really dealt a lot with the Italian composers and Italian opera. We did Monteverdi in the 17th century and Handel in the 18th century and Mozart. We've done Rossini, Donizetti, but now it's time for French opera. Ooh la la, I'm calling this Fun Operas in French today, which is a whole different world in many ways. The French are different from the Italians, and we're going to explore some of that, and I think hopefully we'll have some fun today, going through the whole spectrum from the Baroque to modern times. So French opera, when we try to distinguish it from the other styles, particularly Italian, we'll find that particularly in the beginnings, the 17th, 18th century, into the 19th century, it was tied to the politics. It was designed to serve the state, absolute monarchy, sort of fostered that kind of thing. And very influenced by the unstressed nature of the language. I remember the very first time I went to Paris, my partner and I, was back in the days when you had to go out and buy francs before the euro. And they asked for the passport, and they said, where are you staying? And I said, oh, the Hotel Andrea. And he said, l'Hotel Andrea. The accent heads toward the end there. The last time I was in Paris, coming back from an opera, I think, and there was this gelato place open, and I thought, oh, that's just the thing, a little snack before bed. And so I went in and I asked for my favorite flavor, Italian flavor, which is nocciola. And the young woman said, nocciola. The accent is toward the end, and there is much less sort of internal accentuation at in the middle of the sentence. We tend to go up and down in French, in English, and in Italian, even more so. But in Italian, it's sort of the phrase sort of bubbles along till you get to the end, and that's where the main accent is. Those of you who study the language know that. And that is reflected, of course, in the singing. There is a tendency for what we would call recitative style declamation. That is this sort of singing while speaking rather than actual song. Inclusion of ballet throughout the history of French opera. Ballet was very important. Love of spectacle, really big, impressive scenes on stage. Avoidance of musical extremes or excess compared to the Italians. The French tend to be a little more moderate in that sort of thing. Almost no rubato, that is to say, flexible rhythm. If you think of, if I just do Happy Birthday in a rubato style, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. That sort of slowing down and maybe speeding up. Rubato means robbed. Theory is you steal a little time here and give it back later. The French do that rarely. Ornamentation in the form of what the French call agrément, these little stylized figures, particularly in keyboard music, there's little twists and turns in the fingers, and that is reflected sometimes in the singing as well. And what's interesting about French opera is that many of the important composers in the style were not French. Louis was Italian, rather. Gluck was Bohemian. Rossini, of course, Italian. Meyerbeer was German. Verdi, Italian. And Offenbach was also German. In general, the Italians, who sort of thought, they invented opera and they sort of felt they owned it, they thought that French opera was too refined, too subtle, too reliant on dance, too delicate, too pretty in a way, too understated. In a word, boring. That was the Italian point of view about French opera. On the other hand, the French thought Italian opera was too exaggerated, too extreme, too flippant, too crude, too over-emotional, too tasteless, in a word, vulgar. So there's no, getting around these taste distinctions, as the ancient Romans said, de gustibus non disputandum. There's no arguing about taste. All right, let me get to the lights off here. I think we've got too much light going on. We'll start kind of toward the beginning, opera really began around 1600 in Italy, and the first operas that were performed in Italy in the 1600s were Italian. But this is an opera that is a French opera commissioned for Cardinal Mazarin, Paris, for 1660, but by an Italian composer, Francesco Cavalli, but a French opera. The occasion was the marriage of Louis XIV, you've heard of him, to the Infanta Maria Teresa of Spain. And the actual premiere was 2 years later after this engagement. So here's our situation from Ercole Amante, which means Hercules in love. So we have Hercules, who's a bored husband, infatuated with Iole, who happens to be the intended of Ercole's own son, Hilo. In other words, he's sort of infatuated with his son's fiancée, his future daughter-in-law. In this scene, Hercules has just sent a messenger who is bizarrely dressed in yellow hair, don't ask me why, inviting Iole to go for a stroll with him in the garden. So Hercules asks you to go for a walk. What do you say? Iole can't refuse, but she tries to reassure Hilo of her affection for him. So here is poor Iole in this predicament.
Non potrò mai violenza ardita togliermi a te senza me dar la vita. E quando anche in tal guiso non meco ti perda amato bene, qual miglior sorte avrò che cangiar pene? La si grave timor, l'alma disvezza, che quando Ercol per me palesa affetto, alla rispetto, ed io per me fermezza. Torna, dilli ch'io vado, dillo, vien meco. E quando io non son teco, se dovunque il mio pie giri o la mente, t'adoro ogni or presente.
Just pointing out, we've had this recitative there, and now we launch into what we would consider an aria, or really a duet.
Un sol istante, lunge dal vento che t'impaghi, dica pur che il cui mori ogni preso di vero amante. Amor il fuoco per ogni fuoco fin tiepidisca si giaccio diviene, ed di lui catene più strettamente avvolte ogni poco che c'è dal nostro sciolde. Oh, gloria d'amor più nobile, con fede immobile sempre arder più, memoria non mai vi fu che la vittoria mancassi tu. Si sciolgono quando instabili e più nobile abbandona, la storia non li dita, poiché gli tolgono l'eternità. Amor il fuoco per ogni fuoco che in tiepidisca si giaccio diviene, e le di lui catene strettamente avvolte ogni poco che c'è dello sciolde.
All right, so it's an Italian opera by an Italian, but written in the French style to please the French audience. The French audience is one of the things that they expressed about Italian operas, that they love the machines And the dancing, particularly, those were the things about them that they really enjoyed. Well, this is not from opera, but when we think of French music in the 17th and 18th century, you all know this tune. So that's in case you were ever wondering about that Masterpiece Theater theme. It is by a man named Jean-Joseph Mouret. All right, now let's go on to Rameau in the middle of the 18th century, who sort of personifies French opera at that period. Platée is a comedy in the French style. And we have Cithaeron, the king of the mountain. It suggests to Mercury, we're always in these classical themes, of course, in this period, that Jupiter may teach his jealous wife Juno a lesson if he woos the ugly and conceited marsh nymph Platée in French. In her vanity, Platée has her eyes on King Cithaeron and tries to attract him to the accompaniment of frogs. Jupiter appears to Platée in a variety of shapes, as a donkey, then as an owl, and finally as himself, to be entertained in a mock divertissement. Juno, in hiding, observes the mock wedding ceremony, eventually emerging to unveil the ugly bride and realizes the ridiculous nature of the proceedings. Juno and Jupiter return home arm in arm, where poor Platée is left to be mocked by the country folk. So this is a drag role, and we see there the original tenor who created it, Pierre Gélotte, what the French call travesti. And here we have another royal occasion, a royal wedding of Louis, the Dauphin of France, son of Louis XV, to a Spanish princess. So here's a little bit of Platée. I should mention, by the way, I was meant to mention this going back to this Ercole Amante. This production was by David Alden, who is the director of the Lohengrin, currently running at San Francisco Opera. All right, back to Platée. Here is a little situation about Platée, thinking about her being enamored of the king.
Dis-moi, mon cœur, dis-moi, t'es-tu bien consulté? Mon cœur, tu t'agites. Mon cœur, tu me quittes. Est-ce pour Cithaeron? T'a-t-il bien mérité? Que ce séjour est agréable, est aimable, il est favorable, il est favorable, vivre bien prête sa liberté, vivre bien prête sa liberté, bien prête sa liberté.
Okay, a little fun at the expense of Platée. Let's go on with Rousseau, who could be considered a sort of a antagonist of Rameau, and his Le Devin du Village, the village soothsayer, the same story essentially that we looked at earlier with Mozart in his early opera. Why is it not coming to my brain here? Bastienne. Sorry, there was a little moment there where the clerk in the filing was running around to get the name. Basically the same story. So we have Colin and Colette instead of Bastien and Bastienne, who love one another, yet they suspect each other of being unfaithful, and in Colin's case, with the lady of the manor, and in Colette's, with her courtier. And they each seek the advice and support of the village soothsayer in order to reinforce their love, and after a series of deceptions, Colin and Colette reconcile and are happily married. In the Mozart version, you remember there was that silly aria where the soothsayer tries to conjure up the spirits using fake Latin and all that sort of thing. Here is the sort of happy ending for The Village Soothsayer by Rousseau.
Ils m'ont toujours sans partage, que l'amour soit notre loi, que l'amour soit notre loi. Ils m'ont toujours sans partage, que l'amour soit notre loi. Que ton mariage m'unisse avec toi, que ton mariage m'unisse avec toi, que ton mariage m'unisse avec toi.
So you can see that the French style is very evident here, this idea of avoiding excess. It's all terribly delicate and stylish and in wonderful taste. There's never any vulgar excess that the Italians would be accused of. All right, here is the beginning of a big confrontation between the French and the Italian style. In the 1750s, La Querelle des Bouffons, the War of the Buffoons, which was essentially a stylistic battle represented on the one hand by Rousseau, representing the Italian style, and Rameau representing the French style. And it was all kicked off by this piece that we looked at in our very first class. Do you remember La Serva Padrona of Pergolesi, the Italian from the early 1700s, who sort of pioneered what we think of as the opera buffa style. This is the story about the maid who wants to marry her mistress and ends up doing so. Here's a little bit of that to remind you.
ingannate, troppo, tropinando ignorate. Io che Dio vi dico no, ed un sogno è questo qui, sì, ed un sogno è questo qui.
All right, so just a reminder about that. Too loud? Is that? Okay, well, I'll try to moderate it here. So this was, when it finally showed up in Paris in the 1750s, it caused a bit of a ruckus. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a big champion of this style, said, I can give you a comic duet that is known to everyone there in Paris, and I mention it boldly as a model of singing unity of melody, dialogue, and taste, which I believe will lack nothing when it will be well executed to audiences who know how to listen. This is the first act of La Serva Perdona. We were just listening to this. Lo conosco quegli occhi, I can tell from your eyes. And so this is Rousseau championing this new style coming out of Italy. The elements of this style we were just listening to, simple, elegant, graceful, as you could hear, lively, balanced phrases, repetition, si, no, woodwinds in pairs, 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, etc. This is the comic opera style that was part of the classical elements, and a slower harmonic rhythm, which is to say that the speed of chord change goes down. We don't have complex harmonic changes all the time. So in this War of the Buffoons, Rousseau's side argued that this new Italian style was lively and sparkling, which we were just listening to, enchanting to the ear, engaging, and amusing. And Rameau's side said that it was trivial and inconsequential, simplistic, unsophisticated, and unrefined. So who's going to win this battle? It just goes on. This is Rousseau on French music. There is neither measure nor melody in French music because the language is not sensitive. That French singing is only continual barking, unbearable to all unprejudiced ears, and that the harmony is brutal without expression and feeling, uniquely like schoolboys padding. Hence, I conclude that the French have no music and can have none, or that if ever they have, so much the worse for them. And this is an example of a reaction to all this kind of thing. This is a comic opera in French by a composer you probably never heard of, named Grétry, called L'amant jaloux, or les fausses apparences, the false lover or false appearances. And so here is our plot. The wealthy Lopez does not want his daughter Isabel to marry the hot-headed Spaniard Alonso, whom she has not met. Alonso's sister Isabel is Leonora's best friend. She flees an unwanted match with her tutor and takes shelter with Leonora. Alonso suddenly appears, and Isabel, not wanting her brother to know she is there, hides. A jealous Alonso assumes that the person hiding is a man, a rival for Leonora, and Leonora's father, Lopez, enters, surprised to find a man with his daughter. To avoid his suspicions about Alonso, the maid, backed up by Leonora, comes up with an explanation about why he is there. They say they are hiding this angry stranger's mistress from his jealous wrath. When Isabel, veiled, emerges from hiding and flees, Alonso realizes his jealous error. It was not a romantic rival, but in fact an unknown woman, and the others are amused by his confusion. So here is one of these sort of tangled plots, what would you call like a drawing room farce, from Grétry from the late 1700s. What happened to our sound?
Trompez enfin.
Soit, mais permettez.
Vous n'y entrerez pas.
J'y entrerai.
Quoi? Encore de la jalousie?
De la jalousie, moi? Quelle idée? C'est votre seul intérêt qui me guide. Qui sait si votre père n'a pas posté quelqu'un pour nous écouter?
N'avancez pas. Je vous le défends.
Vous me le défendez.
Allons, si vous m'aimez.
Eh bien, avais-je tort?
Mais qu'insinuez-vous?
Ce que j'insinue. Vous osez me le demander, ce que j'insinue. Que mon malheur est certain, que je suis trompé, trahi par la plus fausse, la plus perfide des femmes.
Que mon maître arrive, vite, sauvez-vous. Allons, partez. Mon père va venir. Voulez-vous me perdre?
Plus d'école, plus de prudence, plus d'école, tout m'est égal. Je ne respire que vengeance, je ne respire que vengeance. Pas de cette indigne rival, indigne rival. Pas de cette
Seigneur, de la prudence.
je ne respire que de vengeance. Pas de cette rival, pas de cette rival.
Vous connaîtrez mon innocence. Sortez, passez. Vous connaîtrez mon innocence. Sortez, passez.
Je ne respire que vengeance, je ne respire que vengeance. Quel jugement fatal, quel jugement fatal, quel jugement fatal, quel bruit chez moi se fait entendre.
Père au ciel, quelle partie prendre?
Un inconnu, ma fille en pleurs. Monsieur, monsieur, apaisez-vous fureur. De ce logis, je suis le maître. Je puis y commander peut-être. Que voulez-vous? Que cherchez-vous? Je veux me satisfaire. La 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 la, point de courage. Va me satisfaire. Oh, me satisfaire. Va me satisfaire. Oh, me satisfaire. Pas de chair. Répondez. Pas de chair. Léonore. J'assasse.
Employez une feinte.
Vous qui rebutez les galants, graves matrones de 20 ans, daignez m'instruire, daignez me dire le secret. Que va-t-elle dire?
Que va-t-elle dire? Je vais vous le dire. Voici le fait. Une femme tremblante, expirante, accourt à pleurer. ville, elle craint pour sa ville, elle craint pour sa ville, nous la cachons ensoleillée. Ce monstre bientôt l'emporter, dans le ferraille il le transporte, il va briser la porte. Et sans vous, monsieur Fromm, hélas, monsieur, sans vous c'était fait de nous.
Une femme, belle finesse,
Une femme!
C'est sa maîtresse. Oui, mon père, c'est
Mais d'où vient ce grand boulot?
l'infidèle, l'infidèle.
Maîtresse infidèle.
La
cervelle.
Il est jaloux, il est jaloux.
Il est jaloux.
Il est jaloux.
Il est jaloux.
Mais très jaloux.
Il est jaloux. Il est jaloux. Que les jaloux sont fous.
Scotez mon agile, il faut comprendre l'impossible. Rien ne me retiendra, l'infidèle, la parjure, la voilà. Au ciel, c'est une femme.
Fuyez, 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 fuyez. Redoutez le courant de ce monstre jaloux.
I was wrong.
Il ne sait plus que dire. Il ne s'emporte plus. Il gémit, il soupire. Ah, il a l'air confus.
Hélas, hélas,
Gémit, il soupire. Ah, il a l'air confus.
Elle a de pouvoir sur son âme. Elle n'est pas encore sa femme. On le voit bien, on le voit bien. Quoi? Vous ne dites rien.
hélas, hélas,
Je sais plus que dire. Il ne s'emporte plus. Gémit, il soupire. Ah, il a l'air confus.
Hélas! La plaisante aventure, 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 la plaisante aventure.
Quite a lot of fun there in the Great Scree. Again, I don't blame you if you've never heard of him. I'm not very familiar with his work myself. So we have a jealous lover who gets away, realizes his mistake, thinking that there was a lover hiding and was actually his own sister. And he also doesn't have to reveal his identity to the father, who doesn't approve of his love affair. So we have a little French action there that, if it reminds you of Mozart's A Marriage of Figaro, then that's with good reason. Mozart's Marriage of Figaro comes about a little less than 10 years after this, but there are other Mozart operas. For example, we looked at La Finta Giardiniera, the false garden maid, which is roughly contemporary with this and has similar sort of style. So this is the French imitating the Italians to some extent. All right, let's go on to another French opera, but by an Italian composer, Donizetti. You thought we were done with Donizetti, didn't you? We looked at him a lot last week. But he wrote a French, more or less comic opera, or we would think maybe a sort of operetta, what the French would call opéra comique, The Daughter of the Regiment, La Fille du Régiment, 1840. And here's our quick little synopsis. Marie is no ordinary canteen girl. She was found as an infant on a battlefield and adopted by a squadron of French soldiers she affectionately calls her fathers. All grown up, this spunky young woman is in love with strapping Tonio, but he's from the enemy side of the battles. He once saved her life, but is still forbidden to ask for her hand since he is not part of the regiment. Adding to this trouble, a mysterious marquise from Marie's past. She shows up claiming to be her aunt. She has come to whisk her away and raise her as a proper lady, facing a future of high society fashions, classical ballet lessons, and a dreaded arranged marriage. What's a tomboy like Marie to do? All right, so here is a scene from the beginning of this. So we'll see that this is Donizetti adapting more or less to the French style. Am I hearing a... Is that a hearing aid, perhaps? Oh, it went away. This is toward the beginning of the opera. So the Tyroleans, which be part of the Alps, are worried about the French being in battle. This is during the Napoleonic Wars. And the Marquise comes in, long-suffering, and she thinks that her situation is so much worse than anyone else's. So here we go with this entrance of the Marquise from the Daughter of the Regiment.
Ces gens-là ne respectent rien. Les brigands de français, les brigands de français, les brigands de français ne respectent rien. Les brigands de français, les brigands de français, les brigands de français ne respectent rien.
Mais voilà la loi que votre frère cesse.
Ils sont partis.
Felicity Palmer, wonderful comic actress. So this is amongst the Tyroleans, but most of the opera really takes place amongst the French in the regiment. The Marquise here finds herself basically amongst the French and is worried about her safety. Here is the scene where Tonio has decided, since he is a Tyrolean himself, but he's decided to become a French soldier so that he can be qualified to marry Marie. And he sings this famous aria with the 9 high Cs. It's in several sections, and here's the first one as he comes in to tell these French guys that he's going to join them.
Qui nous arrive là? Oh, c'est les jeunes paysans de ce matin. Oh.
À mes amis qu'un jour de fête, je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux. À mes amis qu'un jour de fête, je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux. L'amour qui m'a tourné la tête, désormais me rend héros. Ah, quel bonheur! Oui, mes amis, je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux, je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux. Oui, celle pour qui je respire, à mes voeux atteignez sourire. C'est tous espoirs de bonheur trouble ma raison et mon cœur. À mes amis, qu'un jour de fête, je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux. À mes amis, qu'un jour de fête, je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux. Je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux. Je vais marcher. À mes amis, je vais marcher sous vos drapeaux.
All right, that was the first of these many sections. Now we get the soldiers' reaction to all this.
Le camarade est amoureux.
Et c'est en vous seul que j'espère.
C'est notre ventre bleu.
Écoutez-moi, écoutez-moi, moi. Monsieur son père, monsieur son père. Écoutez-moi, écoutez-moi, car je sais qu'il demande de vous de me rendre ici son époux.
Notre fille qui nous est chère n'est pas pour donner le lit. Non, il lui faut un meilleur parti. Il lui faut un meilleur parti. Elle est la volonté d'un
Vous refusez?
complètement. D'ailleurs, elle est promise à notre régiment.
Mais j'en suis, puisqu'en cet instant, je viens de m'engager pour cela seulement. Monsieur son père, monsieur son père, monsieur son père, écoutez-moi. Mais votre fille même,
Ce volet-il, quoi notre enfant?
elle-même, vous dis-je, j'en fais serment.
Notre mari,
Elle-même, j'en fais serment.
fils de la superbe. Il ce moment et promesse constantement.
All right, now he launches into this final conclusion of the scene with the aria with the 9 high Cs. Juan Diego Flores, a wonderful Peruvian tenor. I just saw him this past summer at the Arena di Verona in Verona, in Italy, doing a concert with orchestra, and he was really still in very fine voice, a very tasteful singer. So you probably are detecting, if you remember back to last week, Don Pasquale of Donizetti and Viva la Mamma, and particularly the Elixir of Love. In the Italian style, subtle differences from what we have here in the French style, particularly much more syllabic in terms of the way the lines flow forward and that accent toward the end, much less sort of internal accent in the musical lines. Here is another scene later on in this opera where the Marquise now has discovered Marie with the having been raised by the soldiers in the regiment, and circumstances are put together and she realizes this is her long-lost niece. It's going to turn out it's really her daughter. And so she's taken away from the regiment, and here she is trying to turn her into a proper lady. Sergeant Sulpice from the regiment is there looking after her as well. And here she is not doing very well at her singing lesson.
la
c'est charmant, cela.
La 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 la.
Plus fort.
La 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 la.
Plus doux. Plus doux.
We're going to find that the scene sort of devolves into singing the regimental song, which is much more to Marie's taste. So a singing lesson that sort of goes badly as far as the Marquise is concerned. Here is a scene in which by now the soldiers of the regiment have come to sort of rescue Marie. She is meant to be marrying the son of the Duchess of Krakenthorpe, which is a wonderful spoken role. We've done it here where it was performed by Hermione Gingold. I remember that. Great fun some years ago. And when Tonio comes in to join Marie and Sergeant Sulpice, they sing this little trio about being reunited again.
Vous avez fui, il reviendra, je n'y crois guère, il reviendra, je n'y crois guère.
C'est pas assez, voici, près de toi, c'est fixé près de lui.
Tous les trois,
Quel plaisir, mes amis, le bonheur, quelle ivresse. Tous les trois,
réunis,
quel plaisir,
quel bonheur, quel plaisir,
quel bonheur, nous voilà réunis, quel plaisir, nous voilà réunis, nous voilà réunis, nous voilà réunis, quel bonheur. Tu parleras pour moi, tu parleras pour lui, pour lui, tu parleras pour lui, pour la même, tu les dois,
mais écoutez-moi donc,
il me faut ta promesse,
mais vous ne savez pas, écoutez-nous.
puisque j'ai sa tendresse, et puisque j'ai sa foi, puisque j'ai son amour,
Écoutez-moi,
tu parleras pour lui, tu combleras mes
vous ne
vœux,
savez
tu
pas,
parleras pour lui,
mais vous ne savez
tu
pas,
parleras,
mais,
tu parleras, tu parleras,
mais,
tu parleras,
au diable, écoutez-moi.
Quel plaisir, nous voilà réunis, quel plaisir,
The secret that has been discovered is that the Marquise never had a sister, so she couldn't have had a niece. Instead, it's revealed that Marie is the Marquise's own daughter. Marquise was never married, so her claim to being such a proper lady is not so valid, and she can't really object to the marriage of Tonio to Marie anymore. I thought this was beautifully choreographed and nicely conducted all together, very precise and all that sort of thing. Wonderful production by Laurent Payet, which we did here a few years back with Nathalie Dessay. Here is another version of this, and you see it's just not quite as well done. This is from the Met. It's not quite together. Similar, the same staging, but just a little, not quite as crisp as the one we were watching from, that was from Covent Garden. All right, we're going to, actually take our break now before we go on to Berlioz. We've got some fun stuff from Berlioz to show you, but let's take our break. So it's 5 till, and I'll see you at 5 after. Thanks. All right, let's get started again, because we've got more French music than I can probably get through in the rest of the class, but that's all right, we can always do some more. And we're moving now to Hector Berlioz, who is probably best known for a non-comic opera, The Trojans, which is a monumental, gigantic French grand opera, which was done here at San Francisco Opera a few years back in a brilliant production from Covent Garden. But there's some comedy in Berlioz too, and we'll look at that now. This is an interesting little tidbit of history from Berlioz. December 9th, 1832, Berlioz presented a concert of his works at the Conservatoire. In the audience were Franz Liszt, Frédéric Chopin, Niccolo Paganini, Alexandre Dumas, Heinrich Heine, Victor Hugo, and George Sand, of course, pen name of Amandine Lucille Aurore Dupin. I need to check on that. I think that's Alexandre Dumas the Elder. It's the younger who wrote The Lady of the Camellias, which is the basis of La Traviata. The elder is the one who wrote The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers and so forth. Anyway, it was a distinguished group of all these people in the same room. The first opera by Berlioz was a sort of a comedy about Benvenuto Cellini, loosely based on the artist from the Renaissance, whom we well know from these sculptures that you see here. And it's a sort of a comic romp based on this life of Cellini. And this is a quick synopsis. So the story tells of Cellini's love for Teresa, daughter of the papal treasurer Balducci. His rival, the papal sculptor Fieramosca, overhears Cellini plotting to disguise himself as a monk and run away with Teresa during the carnival. Fieramosca and a friend impersonate Cellini and his apprentice, disguise is working again here. But in the confusion, Cellini kills Fieramosca's friend. The Pope, recast as cardinal in the opera, remembers that he commissioned Cellini to make a bronze statue of Perseus. That's what we see here. There's that Perseus. Which is the task Cellini had planned to abandon in his rush to elope with Teresa. When the cardinal threatens to allow another sculptor to cast the statue, that is, to take the mold and make a statue out of it, Cellini in turn threatens to break the mold of the unfinished Perseus. The cardinal gives Cellini the option of casting the statue by tomorrow or being hanged for murder. Cellini throws all his priceless metal statues and figures into the furnace to cast the Perseus statue. Balducci and Fieramosca acknowledge his victory and all ends well as he is united with Teresa. So a happy ending, all except for that guy who got killed. Here is the scene near the beginning of the opera. This is Fieramosca, who is lurking and overhearing Cellini's plans to elope with Teresa.
Sa aux mains, si j'avais ma rapide aux mains.
À mourir, chère belle, qu'avez-vous dit là? Cette voix est cruelle. Ou Mathérisa, ou prenons l'autre route, ou gazon fleuri, que jamais ne redoute. Ah, que bien est pris,
Si j'avais ma rapide.
ne soyez pas rebelle. Écoutez-moi bien. Demain, surtout n'y manquez pas.
Quoi?
Surtout, n'y manquez pas.
Je n'entends pas.
Venez, la seule colonne.
Colonne.
Cassandro.
Cassandro.
Operatic,
Operatic.
la tour di conti viene troppo fuori, non te per musica. Vous prendrez le bras.
Le bras.
La robe brille. La robe brille. Il finito blanc.
Blanc.
La sera votre amant.
Oui.
Et l'autre manelette. Je vous enlève.
On lève.
Je vous enlève.
On lève.
Et sur le tour de deux, nous allons à Florence.
France.
Le jour heureux. Et sur le port Florence, le cap de l'espérance, nous calco volere.
Due.
Oh, facile ciel, non, votre père mi a pris la face en voulant que s'atterrisa comme une fleur tombée sans terre en l'ombre d'un couvent austère où la main de la Faut-il redire encore l'heure et lieu de notre rendez-vous? Plus bas, Paris plus bas. Demain soir,
L'ardia.
Ah, vous n'y manquerez pas. Vous n'y manquerez pas.
Je n'y manquerai pas.
Je n'y manquerai pas.
De cette colonne,
Colonne, voilà. Dans l'opéra nouveau.
le ton est condamné de se tromper, faire il va frapper aux éclats. Oui, vous saisirez le bras.
Prends le bras.
Comment la robe brille.
Prends le bras.
Et d'un pénitent blanc. D'un pénitent blanc. C'est votre mot. Et l'autre mot me lève. Alors je vous enlève.
Il enlève.
Je vous enlève.
Il enlève. Bien.
Et sous le tour de l'île, nous allons à Florence.
France.
Ravissante tendresse, oh maman,
Quelle fille,
oh maman,
qui laisse
pour
le
le
cœur.
All right. One of those operatic conventions I've talked about is strongly at work here, which is the idea of the aside. Only we in the audience hear Firamoska singing, although he's right there with the other two. They don't hear him because, it's opera. Another little more bit of Berlioz for you. This is Beatrice and Benedict, which is based on Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. And here's quickly the plot of that. Hero welcomes back her fiancé Claudio from the war, while Beatrice trades insults with his friend Benedict as usual, and he swears he will never marry. His friends scheme to trick him into marrying Beatrice by having him overhear a conversation hinting that Beatrice secretly loves him. The trick works, and he decides to pursue her. Hero plays a similar trick on Beatrice, which also works, and the two have a brusque encounter in which they both attempt to conceal their love. Eventually, though, Benedict summons the courage to declare himself, and the two sign a wedding contract declaring, "Today a truce is signed, and we will be enemies again tomorrow." So this famous feuding couple finally join up. Here is a scene from the play where the two are feuding and having a war of words.
I wonder that you will still be talking, Signor Benedict. Nobody marks you.
What, my dear Lady
Start that
Disdain?
over.
I wonder that you will still be talking, Signor Benedict. Nobody marks you.
What, my dear Lady Disdain? Are you yet living?
Is it possible Disdain should die while she had such meat food to feed it as Signor Benedict? Courtesy itself must convert to disdain if you come in her presence.
Then is courtesy a turncoat. But it is certain I am loved of all ladies, only you excepted, and I would I could find in my heart that I had not a hard heart, for truly I love none.
A dear happiness to women. They would else have been troubled with a pernicious suitor. I thank God and my cold blood I am of your humour for that. I had rather hear my dog bark at a crow than a man swear he loves me.
God keep your ladyship still in that mind, so some gentleman or other shall scape a predestinate scratched face.
Scratching could not make it worse, and for such a face as yours were.
Well, you are a rare parrot teacher.
A bird of my tongue is better than a beast of yours.
I would my horse had the speed of your tongue. But keep your way, in God's name, I am done.
Okay, so what would you do if you're going to turn that into a musical scene in an opera? Well, for one thing, you want both people singing together. You're going to have to, what is some of the words? Shakespeare's words are wonderful, but there are too many to fit into an opera scene. And so you get a hate duet where they're both singing at the same time.
Ton cœur qui s'avance, je sens bien, oh dis, palpiter. Un frisson de colère me prend quand je le vois. Un frisson de colère me prend quand je le vois. Sourire m'exaspère, sourire m'exaspère. Et je tremble à sa voix. Sourire m'exaspère, et je tremble à sa voix.
Okay, just a little sample of that from Berlioz. Here's the scene in the play where Benedict's friends, they're aware that he's eavesdropping, and they talk effusively about how much Beatrice secretly loves him. And when they leave and he emerges from hiding, we can see that this news has had the desired effect on him.
This can be no trick. The conference was sadly born. They have the truth of this from Hero. Love me! Why? It must be requited. I hear how I am censured. They say I will bear myself proudly if I perceive the love come from her. They say, too, that she will rather die than give any sign of affection. I did never think to marry. I must not seem proud. Happy are they that hear their detractions and can put them to mending. They say the lady is fair, 'tis a truth, I can bear them witness, and virtuous, 'tis so, I cannot reprove it, and wise. But for loving me, by my troth, it is no addition to her wit, nor no great argument of her folly, for I will be horribly in love with her. I may chance have some odd quirks and remnants of wit broken on me because I have railed so long against marriage. But does not the appetite alter? A man loves the meat in his youth that he cannot endure in his age. Shall these quips and sentences and paper bullets of the brain awe a man from the career of his humor? No! The world must be peopled.
All right, so there are way too many words here as well, but this is perfect fodder for an aria, and here it is, sung in English.
This can be no trick. The conference was sadly born. They have the truth of it from Hero. Love me! Why? It must be requited. Yes, I am in love. With joy I announce it. Farewell to my pride, I hereby renounce it. At last I'm sure it's her I adore. At last I am sure it's her I adore. I love and adore. I love and adore forevermore.
Okay, Alex Schrader, we saw him last week in those excerpts of Don Pasquale, former Adler Fellow, that is a resident young artist at the San Francisco Opera. He now works in our development department, so if he calls you up, give him some money. Okay. All right, Offenbach, born Jakob Offenbach, not Jacques. He was actually a Jewish German, but like so many other foreigners, made his success in the world of French opera, mostly light opera, although his serious opera, The Tales of Hoffmann, is a very fine piece that's very often done. He was from Cologne, and the story goes that because his name began with the letter O, and because of his birthplace, he sometimes jokingly signed his name Eau de Cologne. A little French joke there. So here, just to remind you about music that you definitely know from Offenbach, here's the can-can from Orpheus in the Underworld. All right, so never say you didn't ever hear Offenbach. You definitely have. So some things about him. As I said, he was born in Cologne from a Jewish family, studied in Paris, and then stayed there. It was a famed cello virtuoso. He wrote 100 operettas, including Orpheus in the Underworld, which we were just listening to, a spoof, of course, about classical mythology, La Belle Hélène, which is about Helen of Troy, another spoof, The Grand Duchess of Gerolstein, La Péricole, La Vie Parisienne, the Parisian life, and The Voyage to the Moon. Let's take a look at Orpheus in the Underworld. Here, Pluto has hidden Eurydice in a secret room in the underworld, but Jupiter, who wants her for himself, slips through the keyhole by turning into a beautiful golden fly.
Il m'a semblé sur mon épaule sentir un doux frémissement.
Il s'agit de jouer mon rôle le plus humble car dès ce moment je n'ai droit qu'au bourdonnement. Je n'ai droit qu'au bourdonnement.
La belle bouche, le joli prénom, la belle bouche,
Ma chanson la touche, chantons, ma chanson. Ma chanson la touche, chantons ma chanson.
ah, la belle mouche, le joli fredon. Bella, c'est quel est le temps rire? Veux-tu rester mon compagnon? Ces lieux dont tu forces à m'ouvrir, hélas, me servent de prison. Ne me quitte pas, je t'en prie, reste pour prendre bien soin de toi. Ah, je t'aimerai, mouche jolie, reste avec moi, je t'aimerai, mouche jolie.
Quand on veut se faire adorer, il faut se laisser désirer.
Je la tiens par son aile d'or,
Pas encore, pas encore,
je la tiens par son aile d'or.
pas encore, pas encore.
Méchante, la méchante, la méchante.
J'ai pris des ailes, ma charmante, ma charmante.
La méchante, la méchante, la méchante.
J'ai pris des ailes, ma charmante, ma charmante.
Cette gaze légère, son étoffe, je puis faire filer un papillon.
Attention, attention. La plus prise des deux n'est pas celle qu'on pense. La plus prise des deux n'est pas celle qu'on pense.
Chante, 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 chante.
Stop just for a moment to say that we're going to explore GNS next week over in Sullivan, where we find that there's kind of a goofy silliness. With the French, it tends to be naughtier. No, I think I have an idea for my Halloween costume. I'm thinking. All right. At the Paris Exposition in 1867 was an important event. There's Napoleon III receiving royal and distinguished visitors. Just about everybody around the world, all the crowned heads were there. Verdi went to do his opera Don Carlo. And the opera Grand Duchess of Gerolstein was premiered. And some of the dignitaries who attended the performance were Emperor Napoleon, of course, the future King Edward VII of England, Tsar Alexander II of Russia, Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria, Prime Minister Otto von Bismarck of Prussia. It was an important event. Here is the Grand Duchess inspecting her troops. She has a certain, how would I say, lustiness about her too, the French ooh la la.
Vous aimez le danger, le péril vous attire, et vous ferez votre devoir. Vous partirez demain, et moi je viens vous dire non pas adieu, non pas adieu, non pas adieu, mais au revoir.
She takes fancy to one of the young soldiers. Whoops, I didn't mean to stop. I've screwed up. I'm sorry. I screwed up the subtitles by stopping, so I'm going to start this over again. There we go. Sorry about that. Try that again.
Vous aimez le danger, le péril vous attire, et vous ferez votre devoir. Vous partirez demain, et moi je viens vous dire non pas adieu, non pas adieu, non pas adieu, mais au revoir. J'aime les militaires, j'aime les militaires, j'aime les militaires, leur uniforme coquet, leur moustache et leur plumet. J'aime les militaires, j'aime les militaires, j'aime les militaires, leur évacueur, leur manière, en lutte ma plaie. Quand je vois là mes soldats, pris à partir pour la guerre, fixe droit, l'œil à 15 pas, vrai Dieu, je suis toute fière. Seront-ils vainqueurs ou défaits? Je n'en sais rien, ce que je sais. Je n'en sais rien, ce que je sais. Je n'en sais rien, ce que je sais. Oh, j'aime les militaires, j'aime les militaires, j'aime les militaires. J'aime, oui, j'aime les militaires.
There's a second verse. I'll skip to the end.
Oui, j'aime les militaires.
And of course, the soldier she takes a shine to has a girlfriend, and many complications ensue. Meanwhile, they have to contend with the pompous General Boom.
Des femmes dans nos camps, effroyable licence.
Bon, voilà le chaîneur.
Avez-vous donc, soldats, perdu toute prudence?
Pour être militaire, on attend moins de cœur. On attend moins de cœur.
Vous encore, vous parlez.
Mais, général,
Silence! Silence!
Quand je me fâche, l'on se tait, car ma rigueur, on la connaît.
Quand il se fâche, on se tait, car sa rigueur, on la connaît. À cheval sur la discipline, par le ballon, je vais devant moi, j'extermine le bataillon. Le plus fier ennemi se cache, tremblant tonneau, quand il aperçoit le panache que j'ai là-haut. Le panache que j'ai là-haut, oui. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, je suis moi le général Pouf. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, je suis moi le général Pouf. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, il est le général Pouf. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, il est le général Pouf.
Second verse.
Dans mon salon, après la guerre, je reparais, et la plus belle pour me plaire se met en frais, elle caresse ma moustache en souriant. En ce moment-là, mon panache est fort gênant. Mon panache est fort gênant, oui. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, je suis moi le général Pouf. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, je suis moi le général Pouf. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, il est lui le général Pouf. Et pif paf pouf, et talapapapou, il est moi le général Pouf.
Offenbach. Got one more little suggestion for you before we get finished today. This is from La Pericole. Hortense Schneider created the title role in that. And this is from 1868. The viceroy has his eye on the street singer Pericole, and he plies her with wine. We did this back in Spring Opera in 1976 with Maria Ewing as the wonderful Pericole. Here we have Anne-Sophie von Otter singing the song after she's been plied with wine. Ah, quel dîner. What a dinner I've had.
Ah, quel dîner je viens de faire. Encore une fois, c'est quel dîner je viens de faire. Et quel vin extraordinaire. J'en ai tant bu, mais tant, que je crois bien que maintenant je suis un peu grise. Mais chut, faut pas qu'on le dise. Chut, faut pas. Faut pas. Chut. Si ma parole est un peu vague. Et si on marche, je zigzague. Ici, mon œil est aigrière. Il ne faut s'en étonner, car je suis une machin. Faut pas qu'on le dise. Faut pas. Faut pas.
Okay, la Pericole, wonderful answer piece on auteur. Okay, that's enough of French for today. We'll be with the British next week with Gilbert and Sullivan, so I'll see you then.